So Jai Bhim and Namo Buddhaya to all, and we will begin our class today. This is the 25th of our classes, and this is the last section of the book 2, which is going to be an interesting read as well, like the previous ones. But before we do that, let's chant our Trisarana. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so here we go. Conversion of the fallen and the criminal is the title of the section or part 8. And this has been a long read because we have been looking at how the Buddha converted people from different walks of life or stations of life or different classes of people, different groups of people. And today we are going to look at how the Buddha converted the fallen and the criminals. And this part is divided into 4 sections, which starts with conversion of a vagabond, and then conversion of Angulimala, the robber, and 3, the conversion of other criminals, and the 4th, risk of conversion. And I think these sections are instructing us as to how Buddha was never afraid and he was fearless. And he wanted to reach to people from all the different backgrounds without fear. And therefore, this section can also bring to us the quality of the Buddha, which is the quality of fearlessness, one, because we know that the Buddha is one of the favorite mudra of the Buddha is Abhaydan. Like he gives us the fearless sort of an assurance that once we start following the Buddha Dhamma, there is nothing to fear, there is nothing to worry about, there is nothing to feel insecure. And this quality of the Buddha to go to the places, to meet the people who are vicious, who are violent, who are in a way distorted, and teach them the Dhamma is one of the very astonishing sort of a quality of the Buddha, which we are going to reflect, which we are going to read in this part 8 of the book 2. So this is the first section, begins with a story in Rajagraha, where the Buddha is dwelling, and there is one vagabond. Vagabond is like some hippie, some kind of a person who is living a life of a vagabond, and he is like, as it's described in the verse number 1, that he neither reverenced his parents nor paid respect to his superiors, but always had resort to sacrifice and worship of the sun and the moon and fire when he went wrong, hoping thereby to get merit and feel happy in himself. But whatever this vagabond did in his life, it didn't give him any peace. And he tried it for 3 years, but the peace was not in view. So at last he resolved to go to Shravasti to meet Buddha, and he arrived there in Shravasti, and upon meeting the Buddha and seeing his radiance and his glory, he fell down at the Buddha's feet and said how he was pleased. So the Buddha, of course, explained him the folly of animal sacrifice. He said that there is no merit in animal sacrifice. You are not going to get anything by sacrificing, because that was a time in India, certain school of thoughts were resorting to the sacrifices, all kinds of sacrifices. So in the fire, they lit the fire, they put a lot of sacrificing things like butter and animals and whatnot. So it was like a kind of a party sort of a situation, just like we see today. So the Lord explained the folly of animal sacrifice and the uselessness of all such exercises where the heart was untouched. So you see this sentence, that any practice that doesn't move your heart, that doesn't cultivate our mind, any rituals that doesn't do this to us, the Buddha called is useless. So you see, this is a psychology of the people who resort to certain rituals like the animal sacrifice or going to certain places, conducting certain rituals. But I think this one word, uselessness of all such exercises where the heart was untouched and where there was no final reverence or dutiful behavior to those to whom it belonged. So in a way, Baba Sahib Ambedkar has also offered a cue here to understand, what sort of a ritual we need to conduct. So any ritual that we conduct, it should ultimately touch our hearts. So for example, even in Buddhism, there are a lot of rituals. There are a lot of sanskars. But if those sanskars, they don't turn our heart within, they don't touch our heart, they are useless. So for example, the chanting of Trisarana or a Panchashil, or going to visit the Buddhist places or some places associated with the Buddha, if we go there, if we perform certain rituals, certain, say for example, circumambulation around the stupa, and it doesn't touch our heart, then Baba Sahib says that those rituals, those sort of ceremonies, rites are useless. So I think this is a very fundamental point of when we try to understand even rituals of Buddhism. So whatever is associated with Buddhist rituals, ultimately it should touch our hearts, and it should generate reverence, in this case for the Buddha, and dutiful behavior to our ideals. And in conclusion, recited certain gathas. So in conclusion, after teaching this, the Buddha recited certain gathas with resplendent with glory, lit up the place and all the surrounding country with the brightness of his presence. So, Buddha is, of course, associated with light, and his light pervades the world. And we know the simile of light, the Buddha as a light, was favorite of Baba Sahib Ambedkar. When he draw the photo of Buddha, beneath it, he wrote the light of the universe. So we can understand that it's very figurative, the brightness of the Buddha went everywhere. So the message given here and the gathas given here that the Buddha recited, verse number 7 and verse number 8 and verse number 9, I'm going to read as it is because they are very beautifully said. So verse number 7, the great man is entirely free from covetous desire. He's not greedy. The great man is not greedy. The great man is not having that tremendous attachment towards certain things. He's in a way free. He dwells in a place of light himself, enlightened. Wow, what a beautiful use of the words. So what does the great man does? He dwells in a place of light himself, enlightened. So the great man doesn't dwell in the darkness and doesn't dwell in the ignorance. So a place of light, himself enlightened. Although perchance he meets with sorrow, sometimes he can meet with sorrow because that is the nature of the world, that we are bound to meet the sorrow and the suffering. He rejoices without consternation. He exhibits his wisdom. So even if there is an encounter with the sorrow, because we are bound to encounter all these worldly winds, the Loka Dhamma, as it is said in the Mahamangal Sutta, Putassa Loka Dhamme Chittang Yassana Kampati Asokam Virajam Kemam. So this Loka Dhamma, these worldly winds of sorrow and pleasure and praise and blame, they are all going to be there. We are going to encounter them as long as we live in this world. But the great man, even in those circumstances, they exhibit their wisdom. So that's the quality of a great man. The wise man, Bhadra is called a wise man, concerns himself with no worldly business. He desires neither wealth, children, or possessions. Possessions, in that case, that time, the main possession was the possession of land. Always carefully observing the precepts and walking in the way of supreme wisdom, he hankers not after strange doctrine or wealth or honor. So these are the qualities of the great man, wise man, that the Baba Ambedkar has put into this verse number 8. And 9, the wise man knowing the character of instability. Instability means impermanence, anicca, not always so. The things are going to change. Knowing this, as a tree in the midst of sand. So for example, there is a tree in the midst of a sand. It's not permanent. It can collapse anytime. Just like that, the instability of the world around us. He uses every effort to change his friend whose mind is unfixed and to bring him back from impurity to virtue, purity. You see, the quality of mind not being fixed is very important. And, we have to fix our minds. We have to fix our mind in such a way that, they can be cultivated in the proper direction. So these three verses, the verse number 7, the verse number 8, and verse number 9, in a sense, represent the quality of the people that we all need to cultivate. So for example, to summarize, that the great man is entirely free from covetous desire. They are not neurotically attached to anything. They dwell in a place of light, himself enlightened. So even if they live in a place of light, they are themselves enlightened. So they have this great wisdom inside them. And even if they meet sorrow or any suffering, or as I said, the white worldly winds, they are unshakable. They don't move. They exhibit wisdom even in the time of the crisis. And the wise man, Bhadra, concerns himself with no worldly business. He desires neither wealth, children, or possessions, always carefully observing the precepts and walking in the way of supreme wisdom. He hankers not after strange doctrine. And the wise man, knowing the character of instability as a tree in the midst of sand, uses every effort to change his friend whose mind is unfixed and to bring him back from impurity to virtue. So you see, it is not, for a wise man, it's not enough to purify himself or herself. For the wise people, it's not enough to purify themselves. They have to go one step further. They have to try to change their friends. They have to try to fix the minds of the friends, the minds of the people, the minds of the society around it. And this is very remarkable. This line, like the line that I was just reading before, that the qualities of the ritual that we have been seeing, that whatever rituals we do, whatever rites and ceremonies we conduct, they need to touch our hearts. They need to touch our very mind. And that's how we can have that reverence towards something which needs to be revered. And these qualities, like the quality of making all efforts to transform, to purify, to fix the minds of our friends, is the quality of a wise man. So you see, in Buddhism, there is this aspect of making an impact on the other people, try to help them to cultivate or their minds to be at their best. And I think this dimension, the verse number 9 looks very simple, but when we study it deeply, when we try to analyze it deeply, it's very striking. The wise man, knowing the character of instability, knowing that everything is anicca, everything is not going to be so, everything is bound to change, everything is bound to transform. As a tree in the midst of sand, this is a simile, uses every effort to change his friend whose mind is unfixed and to bring him back from impurity to virtue, purity. So that was the case of a vagabond. That's how the Buddha converted the vagabond, the hippie of that time. Vagabond is an equivalent of hippie today, So living a reckless life and, trying, experimenting with different stuff, which is good to some extent, but then ultimately we have to find a way to fix our minds. So let's go to the section 2, conversion of Angulimal, the robber. We all know this story. This has been a part of an epical tradition, the story of Angulimal. And we have been reading it time and again. And this is, I think, one example of how vicious we are, even how destructive we are, how fallen we are, how criminal we are. There is always a possibility for every human being to practice and know the truth that the Buddha taught. And I think this is very interesting from a lot of point of view, because sometimes we feel that we are good for nothing, we cannot do anything, we cannot change, we cannot transform. There is no possibility for us. There is no opportunity to transform. There is no opportunity to change. But the example of Angulimal is something which is a kind of an example of how even the criminal, even the serial killer, has that possibility of getting enlightened. And I think that shows the power of Buddhism, and that shows the importance of Buddhism for everyone, for the good people, for the bad people, for whoever they are. The Dhamma is always going to, lead to the welfare, lead to the happiness of anybody who practices it. That's why Tathagata says that the Dhamma is beneficial at the beginning, beneficial in the middle, and beneficial at the end. Even if we start practicing little bit of the Dhamma today, we can find the immediate benefits. And this case of Angulimal shows that even if however deeply we are in the dungeon of ignorance and so-called sins, even then there is a possibility to get enlightened. And this story of a robber Angulimal, a ruffian whose hands were red with blood, he has killed 999 human beings. And he used to cut their finger and make them into a garland. And it said that the Buddha was supposed to be his last victim. So he was really a very draconian sort of a person. So verse number 3 says, once when the Lord was staying in Shravasti in Jeta's grove, he has heard of the ravages committed by the robber Angulimal. And this verse number 3, I think we have all need to listen carefully. The blessed Lord decided to convert him into a righteous man. So it was a desire of the Tathagata to convert Angulimal. It was not the intention of Angulimal to get converted. It was Tathagata's great compassion that leads him to make efforts to convert Angulimal. Very significant. So it shows of what quality we need to cultivate. Even if the people are fallen or people are criminals, we have to make efforts to convert them. So one day, and this shows what kind of a person Buddha was. So one day, after taking his meal, Buddha didn't need to be fed. Today we see a lot of these gurus, they like to be pampered, but Buddha ate with his own hands. He went out to get his own food. This is very significant. The enlightened, the greatest person who walked on this earth, was looking after himself. So one day, after taking his meal and after putting away his bedding, he didn't ask his servant or attendant to put away his bedding. He was doing it himself. With robes and bowls, set out on his journey to find the robber Angulimal. Very significant. It looks like a very mundane reading, but it's very significant that the Tathagata himself is taking the efforts, taking a lead to convert Angulimal. But seeing him journeying thither, near netherds and goatherds and plowmen and wayfarers called out, "Don't go that way, recluse," they said. "It will take you to the robber Angulimal." So of course, Angulimal was known for killing. He was a mass killer. And even 10, 20, 30 or 40 people couldn't go there because Angulimal will slay them. But without a word, the Lord held on to his way. He was determined to go that way, where even the 10 people, 20 people couldn't dare to go that way. The Buddha was determined to go that way. A second time and at a third time, those near there and the rest repeated their warning. "Don't go that way, recluse. It will take you to the robber Angulimal." The Lord went his way. From some way off, the robber saw the Lord coming and marveled exceedingly that, where even companies of 10 to 50 travelers dare not come his way, this solitary recluse should be seen to be forcing his way alone. And the robber was minded to slay this recluse. He said that, "I will slay this Shramana." So armed with sword and buckler and with his bow and quiver, The robber followed up the Lord's trail. Now he was going behind Lord. Lord is walking in front, and Angulimal is following him. The Lord, while he himself was proceeding at his wonted pace, the robber, for all his efforts, could not catch him up. Angulimal couldn't catch the walking Buddha. Thought the robber, this is a wonderful and marvelous thing here to afford. I could always overtake an elephant or horse or carriage or deer when going full speed, and yet here am I unable, despite all my efforts, to overtake this recluse while he proceeds as his wanted pace. So he stopped and shouted to the Lord to stop. He said, stop, recluse, stop. When the two met, the Lord said, I have stopped Angulimal. Very significant. When the Buddha says, I have stopped, that means everything, his mind is at ease. His mind is supremely stopped, isn't it? Our mind is going rounds and rounds and rounds and rounds and rounds and rounds, hankering after this, hankering after that, and going haywire. But the Buddha's mind, it at ease, it is at rest, it has stopped. So he says, I have stopped Angulimal for your sake. Will you stop following your career of an evildoer? I have been pursuing you in order to win you over, to cover you to the path of righteousness. The good in you is not a dead. Wow. See, look at this word. The good in you is not a dead. And the good in every human being is not a dead. Like so many religions talks about the original sins that every human being carry within them. The Buddhism starts with other end. The Buddhism says that there is good in everybody which is still living. There is a possibility of enlightenment to awaken to the truth, exist with every human being. The good in you is not a dead. This single line can give us such a hope. If you will only give it a chance, it will transform you. The good within you, if you give it a chance, it will transform you. You don't need to bring goodness from outside. The goodness is there in you. If you give it a chance, it will transform you. What a powerful word. The good in you is not a dead. If you will only give it a chance, it will transform you. You don't need an external force to transform you. The goodness within you will lead you to the goodness. Angulimal felt overcome by the words of the Blessed One, saying, at last this sage has tracked me down. Nobody has tracked me down so far. This is a very significant language. The sage has tracked me down, not physically. Physically Buddha found him, but psychologically, deeply, the Buddha has tracked him. Buddha saw who he was. Buddha knew who he was, who the Angulimal was, what was his mind like, what was going through his mind. Buddha saw it. And as Angulimal says, at last the sage has tracked me down. The sage knows who I am. The sage knows what kind of a person I am. And now that thy hallowed words ask me to renounce evil deeds forever, I am prepared to give myself a trial, replied Angulimal. Angulimal threw into a deep abyss the strings of his victim's fingers, which he wore round his neck, and fell at the master's feet and craved admission to the brotherhood. He said, now please, Lord, admit me in the Sangha. The Lord, the guide of gods and man, Purusa Dhamma Sarathi, Satta Deva Manusanang, said, Alsman, follow me. Alsman means Bhikshu, follow me. Now he ordered Angulimala that instant. Only said, okay, Bhikkhu, follow me. And Alsman, since that summon, Angulimala did become. With that summons, Angulimala did become the Bhikkhu. When the Buddha said, Bhikkhu, follow me. So Angulimal became the Bhikkhu. So Prasannajit, was trying to track down Angulimal. They were very fearful, the people of Kosala, because this man was so dangerous. He tried in vain many times, Prasannajit, to capture him, suppress him, but it was not possible. So one day, Prasannajit went to Lord Buddha and he inquired. He says, Buddha, he was looking sad and dull. Buddha inquired, what is the matter, sire? Is there trouble with Seniya Bimbisara of Magadha, or with Lichavis of Vesali, or with any hostile power? He says, no problem at that end. But this Angulimal, the criminal, is giving me a lot of troubles, lot lot of sleepless nights. Then the Buddha said, okay, if you were to see Angulimal right now here with his tonsured head, what would you do? So he said, Prasannaji said, I will salute him, rise to meet him, or would invite him to be seated, or invite him to accept robes and other requisites. Or I would extend to him the defense, protection, and safeguards which are his due. But how could the shadow of such virtue ever extend to one so wicked and depraved? At that moment, the Reverend Angulimal was seated quite close to the Lord, who, stretching forth his right arm, said, this sire is Angulimal. This sire is Angulimal, he said. At this, the king in his alarm became dumbfounded. He became dumbfounded. With every hair of his body standing erect, seeing this, the Lord said, fear not, sire, fear not. There is no cause for fear here. There is no cause for fear near the Buddha. So the king's fears and alarm abated, and across to the Reverend Angulimal he went, saying, is your reverence indeed Angulimal? Yes, sire. What, sire? Was your father's family and your mother's? My father was a Gaga, sire, and my mother a Mantani. Be of good cheer, Gaga, Mantani Putta. I will take care to supply you with all requisites. So this is about how the Buddha converted Angulimal. And then we know the stories of Angulimal, that he was, when he went for his alms round, when he went for his Bhiksha, Pindapat, people threw stones at him, people hurled mud at him, because his background was that of a criminal. So people couldn't accept the reality. And one day, at verse number 28 says, one day when duly robed and bowl in hand, Angulimal had gone into Shravasti for alms. He was hit by a clod flung by one man, by a club flung by a second, and by a potsherd flung by a third, so that it was with a broken head, steaming with blood. His head was broken. He was steaming with blood everywhere. He went to the Lord. Seeing him drawing near, the Lord said to Angulimala, this is what Lord told to Angulimal, endure it all, endure it all. Thus did Angulimal, the robber, become a righteous man by accepting the teachings of the Buddha. And this is what he says in Theragatha. So verses from Angulimal. Let's read the verses from Angulimal. Expressing the joy of the bliss of deliverance, he said directly from Angulimal's mouth, who shows zeal where zeal was none, who with virtue clocks his past, who in youth to Buddha cleaves, he, like the moon, floods earth with light. So, of course, we need a lot of vigor, a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm to practice the Dhamma. If there is no zeal, there is no energy, there is no enthusiasm to practice the Dhamma, we end nowhere. So, Angulimal teaches us, we have to show the zeal. And with virtue, we can do away with our past. And in the youth, we have to stick to the Buddha. Then what happened to us? Like the moon floods earth with light. Again, the simile of light. Let my foes hear this gospel. I told you that the Buddha is very concerned about every human being. So Angulimal, the most wicked man, the most criminal man, a serial killer, is saying this to his foes. He's not talking about his enemies. He's talking about his foes. Look at the compassion that Angulimal ultimately achieved. The sort of mind ultimately Angulimal achieved. Let my foes hear this gospel, embrace this creed, and follow wisdom's sons who cleave to it. Let my foes hear in season love's message, which is meek forbearance, and confirm their lives to it. As finger necklace, Miss Angulimala, I, bandit, lived and whirled downstream. I lived and whirled downstream. I was going astray. My life was going to nothing. He brought me to land. When I was drowning in the water, he, the Tathagata, brought me to land. As finger necklace, I was dipped in blood. Saved now am I. What a beautiful poetry that Angulimal uttered. And this can be found in Theragatha. So, conversion of other criminal. This is also interesting. And I think these are taken from the Chinese records, this section 3 and section 4. So there were 500 criminals who were living on the Dakshina Patha. There was a highway going from Rajagir all the way down to South India called Dakshina Patha. And on the Dakshina Patha, there was a big mountain and there was a mountain pass, and about 500 bandits were living there. So 500 robbers had taken up their abode in this defile, who used to murder and rob all travelers that passed that way. So the Buddha residing in the neighborhood and considering the case of these men, that they understood the nature of their conduct, and that although he had come into the world to teach them, yet their eyes had not seen him. Wow, look. What the Buddha says, that he has come in the world so that humanity can see what enlightenment can be. So Buddha had come into the world to teach them, yet their eyes had not seen him, nor their ears heard the tidings of his law. He resolved to go to them. So if the Buddha has come here so that people can witness him, if the people are not witnessing him, the Buddha will go there so that he can transform them. Consequently, he transformed himself. This is a very interesting story. Consequently, he transformed himself into a man richly dieted on a well-caparisoned steed, with his sword and bow, with bags of silver and gold on his saddle bow, and precious stones studding his horse bravery. On entering the defile, loud neighed his steed. On hearing the sound, the 500 robbers started up, and spying the traveler, exclaimed, "Never have we had such a prospect of booty. Let us be up and capture him." That's what they said. Let's be up and capture him. So they proceeded to surround the traveler with a view to prevent his escape. But on seeing him, they fell on the ground. On their falling to the ground, they exclaimed, "What God is this? What God is this?" That was the splendor of the Buddha. Whenever we meet the Buddha, we cannot but, touched by the presence of his being. We cannot be touched by the personality of the Buddha. It has such a profound effect on the people who came in contact with the Buddha. Same with Baba Sahib Ambedkar. There are a lot of stories of people meeting him and their lives getting transformed completely and fully. So on this, the travelers began to explain that such hurts and pains as they give and receive were trivial compared with the pain caused by sorrow that rules the world, and the wounds of unbelief and doubt, that not but the wisdom resulting from earnest attention, hearing to the scriptures, could heal such wounds. And then he added these words. You see, so what these 500 robbers, bandits are sharing is that they beat people, they take their belongings, but this pain is nothing compared to the pain caused by sorrow that rules the world. So there is a sorrow in the world that causes so much pain in the world. The wounds of unbelief and doubt, and that not but the wisdom resulting from earnest attention. So earnest attention is important for acquiring the wisdom, and that earnest attention must be given to the scriptures could heal such wounds. Then he added these words and said, "There is no painful wound so bad as sorrow, no piercing arrow so sharp as folly. Nothing can remedy these but an earnest attention to religious instruction. From these the blind receive sight, the deluded are enlightened. Men are guided and led by these as eyes given to them without eyes. This then is able to dispel unbelief, to remove sorrow, to impart joy. The highest wisdom is the lot of those who hear." See, the hearing, the quality of hearing, the Dhamma is very important. And here, if you look in the book, that is in the parentheses, the word hear. That means, we have to make efforts to hear. And there is a word called Shravaka. The Buddha disciples were called a Shravaka, one who hears, because that time the books were not so popular. There were, of course, books, but they were not popular. The only thing that people could do was hear, and that's why they are called the Shravakas. So you see, This is the title of him who has acquired the greatest merit, the most to be revered. On hearing this, the robbers repeated of their evil lives, and the arrows of themselves left their bodies, and their wounds were healed. Then they become the disciples and obtained rest and peace. You see, so this is what the travelers, the traveler means, of course, Buddha. Sorry for this misunderstanding. The Buddha is a traveler who tried to explain them that their deeds are nothing compared to the deeds done by other people who cause so much wounds of unbelief and doubt. Okay. So we can see that, the way the Buddha has framed this from verse number from verse number 11 to 16, and I am yet to find out the source of this, from where it has taken. I think it mostly taken from the Chinese sources, this particular paragraph, the particular section, and section number 4. So let's look at it again. There is no painful wound so bad as sorrow, no piercing arrow so sharp as folly. Nothing can remedy these but an earnest attention to religious instruction. From this the blind receive sight, the deluded are enlightened. Men are guided and led by these as eyes given to them without eyes. This then is able to dispel unbelief, to remove sorrow, to impart joy. The highest wisdom is the lot of those who hear. Here means those who learn the Dhamma, those who learn the instruction. To them the highest wisdom can be awakened. This is the title of him who has acquired the greatest merit. On hearing this, the robbers repeated of their evil lives, and the arrows of the arrows of themselves left their bodies, and their wounds were healed. Then they became disciples and obtained rest and peace. See, these are not the incidences where the Buddha has converted the most criminal and the vicious ones. In Pali text, there are instances where the Buddha has converted the man-eaters, the cannibals of Alavika jungle. So Buddha has also went to the place where the man-eaters were living, and he has converted them. So Buddha often took the risk, and he has tried to reach even to the so-called unsafe places where to teach the Dhamma. And this is the last section of the part 8 of this book 2, risk of conversion. In old times, Buddha was residing in a country about 50 li from Rajagraha, full of mountains, because we have seen Rajagraha had 5 mountains. In these mountains, there lived a certain clan of about 122 persons who occupied themselves in hunting and fed themselves on the flesh of the animals they killed. The Buddha goes to the place and converts the women who were left alone during the day whilst their husbands were hunting, and then adds these lines. So this is not edited properly, but it gives the message that Baba Ambedkar wanted to give. He who is human does not kill, or it is human not to kill. He is ever able to preserve life. This principle Chu, I don't know what is Chu, but I'm sure that this has been taken from Chinese sources. This principle Chu is imperishable. So to be human is not to kill. Those who kill, they are not human. And this principle is imperishable. So if we want to become a human being, we cannot kill. And there is a lot of things, there is a speech of Baba Ambedkar says that it's very, people thought of becoming a god, but first become a human being. And to become a human being, the imperishable principle is not to kill. No calamity shall betide that man. Politeness, indifference to worldly things, hurting no one without place for annoyance. This is the character of Brahma Heaven or Brahma Dev. So this is actually Brahma Lok. Brahma Lok means Brahma Vihar. It has nothing to do with the Brahma. Traditionally, the highest abode, the Param Lok, is called the abode of Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekha. So here, of course, the Buddha is talking about Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekha. So those who cultivate Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekha, they are living in the highest abode. Ever exercising love towards the infirm, pure according to the teachings of the Buddha, knowing when sufficient has been had, See, this is very important to know when sufficient has been had, because we are always trying to run after a lot of things. We are trying to accumulate a lot of things, but we never know where to stop. So the Buddha says that this is called ahara, intake. So we should know the limits of our intake in terms of food, in terms of wealth, in terms of anything, everything, in terms of our sensual impoundings, because there is also limit to what our senses, how long our senses could take something. You know, if we flash a lot of light to our eyes all the time, we might get blinded. Same with loud music. So we should know when sufficient has been had in all terms. This is, I think, a key concept. This is called santosh. And Baba Sahib says that santosh is the param dhan. It is the highest wealth that one can acquire. So knowing the limits of what we know, what we want, knowing when sufficient has been had, knowing when to stop. This is very interesting. Knowing when to stop, this is to escape the recurrence of birth and death. We don't know when to stop. We don't know whether we had sufficient. The women, having heard these words, were converted, and on the men's return, although they wished at first to kill Buddha, they were restrained by their wives, and listening to these words of love, they also were converted. And then he added these lines: there are 11 advantages which attend the man who practices mercifulness, the man who practices metta, the man who practices mudita, the man who practices upeka, the man who practices karuna. There are 11 advantages. Okay, so this, when we practice metta, when we cultivate metta, cultivation means bhavana, means to grow, to cultivate. So Buddha took this word from the farmers, you know, because the farmers cultivated their lands. And this is a very interesting example of how, you know, the meditation. Meditation is not just about sitting; it's also about cultivating our minds. So when we cultivate like this, the 11 advantages are there. What are the 11 advantages? His body is always in health, happy. He is blessed with peaceful sleep. And when engaged in study, he is also composed. So you see, if our mind is full of hatred, we cannot even study. We cannot even focus. We cannot even learn something. Even we cannot understand something. So these are the first three advantages when our mind is at the highest abode, the what is called the Brahma Vihar. He has no evil dreams. Fourth one, we are sometimes troubled by the evil dreams, but the person who cultivates metta bhavana doesn't have evil dreams. He is protected by heavens, devas, and loved by men. He is protected by the powerful people, and he is loved by man. Everybody loves him or her, you know. He is unmolested by poisonous things, escapes the violence of war, and unharmed by fire or water. Successful wherever he lives, and when dead, goes to heaven of Brahma. These are 11. Okay, don't worry about these words like heaven of Brahma. You know, we just think that we don't know what is going to happen after death. But even if there is a life after death, if we practice like this, there is an assurance, you know, that we will end up in a good place if we have to take it that way. Having uttered these words, both men and women were admitted into the company of his disciple and obtained rest. So here we complete our book 2, and we will open up for discussions and comments. But that's the end of the book 2. We have finished book 1, book 2, and book 3 is going to be very interesting because that's the teachings of the Buddha. That you know, the way Baba Sahib Ambedkar has classified it, and I find book 3 very interesting, and I'm sure that you will all find book 3 interesting. But before we jump on to book 3, let's stop here and talk about what we have studied today. Anything, any comment or any reflections are welcome. If not, then we can stop here our class today. But I'm sure somebody must be having something to share or something to cogitate on, something to reflect upon.
The backstory of Angulimala is very interesting. His father, who was a Brahmin, was working with Koshal Naresh, King Pasendi. And King Pasendi himself named Angulimala as Ahimsak,
Okay.
which means harmless one. But when he got into the Taxila University for study purposes, he was his guru's favorite, and because of that favoritism, Guru allowed him to stay in his own house. Then the other students were jealous of him, and the student planned to make Guru against him. So, and they were successful in turning Guru against him by making a scene that Ahinsaka was seducing Guru's wives, and he was proud of that, and he was wiser than Guru. Such misbelief instituted in his guru's mind, and he punished Ahinsaka to offer him 1,000 human fingers as dakshina. And that's how the Ahimsak, who was the harmless one, turned into the Angulimala. And after becoming monk, you have shared the story. This is very transformative. And Angulimal, after becoming monk, he helped one pregnant woman while she was having very severe labor pain. He said that, sister, since I was born with the noble birth, that is, I became monk, I do not recall intentionally killing or a living being. Through this truth, may there be well being for you and well being for your baby.
Good.
So this was so transformative. We can see the journey, and we can see the mind impact on the well-learned guru also. How mind can be corrupted with the misunderstandings, and Buddha found the originality, asking the Angulimala the question that uh, he asked him to bring the tree leaves from the tree. He plucked the leaves from the tree and offered to Buddha. And now he asked Angulimala again to, pluck it back. And he said, how it can be possible? Then he asked, how it can be possible that which you can't repair, why you are killing it, the fingers he collected. So, and the specialty of Baba Sahib here, uh, I think so. The Buddha and his Dhamma has the specialty of collecting it sequentially. Uh, though whole Tripitaka has been learned, this is like a small book which can be, give the glimpse of the whole Tripitaka, and that is the specialty, and that reflects how deep study Baba Sahib has. Thank you.
Thank you, Richa. Thank you. Anybody else?
Jai Bhim,
Thank you,
sir.
Rucha. Sadhuvat for Angulimal Paritta, Rucha. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, Vishai.
Sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Shashank
Jai
bhai.
Bhim, sir, it's a wonderful, I can say, today's discussion over Angulimala and the conversion of the robber, conversion of the criminal. I was just doing a morning walk today, and the one line that really touches to my heart from the Angulimal, that the good in you is not yet dead. If you will only give it a chance, it will transform you. And that really, that really touches to my heart, that, whenever we say that, life is getting like miserable, life is getting sorrow, and then we, try to, try to get trapped into the sorrowness and suffering, and we suffer a lot. And sometimes our friend also gets suffer a lot. They said that, there is nothing, there is no hope for me, there is no good in me, and when we try to see that, oh no, man, you have a good in you, you have potential in you, you will come out of that suffering, you will come out of that pain. And that I can say, that indication that gives the Buddha to Angulimala, that good in you is not yet dead. You will definitely cultivate a little bit of good in every day, then definitely it will transform you into a very good, strong human being. And that kind of a message Baba Sahib wants to give, that, people around us are suffering a lot, and we have to give them the hope. And we as Ambedkarite Buddhists have a wonderful light in our hand to give them the light, to give them the hope, to give them the good in them, and to transform their life. And that is one line of this Angulimala chapter really touches to my heart. And that definitely in this 21st century, in the pandemic world, people are a lot of depressed people, and people are suffering a lot of depression. And in the initial phase of a pandemic situation, I think very few people from a Buddhist community really got suffered because of depression. But if we give this message of hope, definitely I can say the people will transform their life. The people will start observing the good in them.
True. Very good. No, that's why, I envision a study of Buddha and Dhamma where every single line, every single word of the Buddha, of Baba Sahib Ambedkar written in the Buddha and Dhamma is reflected upon. And there are books like that. I have just come across some books like that, which has done it with Quran and with Bible, where they have gone through every verse and they have given the note or whatever of that particular saying and the context. And I think this, though Buddha and Dhamma is only 600 pages, if we can give good annotations, good references, and good notes from all different it will run into many pages, maybe 3,000 pages we are talking about. So I think the part of our study, the aim of our study is to really encourage that kind of going deep into the Buddha and his Dhamma, knowing the Buddha and his Dhamma for ourselves, taking the notes down on everything that we study, and reflecting on the main text and the notes and the context, and linking it up with Tripitaka. Not always so, because sometimes, the Tripitakas, as the Buddha said in Kalama Sutra, we cannot even accept everything given in Tripitaka. And we are going to see how Baba Sahib Ambedkar has solved that problem as to how to understand which is the Buddha Vachana and which is not. So I think what Shang, you have been saying is that we have to find out this deep insights of the Buddha and his Dhamma and communicate with people. As I was reading, like, we have to know the limits, how much we want certain things. And if our desires are not curtailed, they become neurotic desires, they become unbridled desire, they become like burning fire, which has got this potential to burn everything around us. So we need to know the limits. We need to know the extent of how much we can afford to stretch ourselves. Otherwise, if we stretch ourselves in a wrong direction, that creates a lot of pain and suffering for us. So I think you're right in a sense that we need to communicate these deep messages of the Buddha and Dhamma to the people around us.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And also wonderful point you have mentioned is about the rites and rituals, and which rites and rituals in Buddhism is really wonderful, that the way we, chanting the three sarana, the way we chanting the Panchashil. So if it comes to the deep Shraddha, the deep faith in the Buddha, I think that will definitely touch our mind, touch our heart. And one beautiful thing in the Buddha and his Dhamma, at the last page of the Buddha and his Dhamma, the Baba Sahib has given so beautifully the prayer, to be born in the land of Buddha. And that really touches to my heart, that how can we create a land of Buddha on earth and creates a heaven on earth. Yes. And, give a light to everyone. So that kind of rites and rituals, if we cultivate, and that land is really can be possible to create on earth.
I agree. No, it's very interesting. Before a few days, I was talking to somebody, and they are into music and dramas and all. I said, why don't you compose the last prayer in maybe Hindi or Marathi or even in English? Because, if you can compose it, and if that prayer can be, listened in a musical composition, it would be wonderful. So I think there is a lot of work pending here in terms of Buddha and Dhamma. The last verse, needs to be, composed very nicely with the music and beautiful sort of rendering of it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Anyway, anything up there with anybody would like to say, comments or whatever? If there is nothing, no comment from anybody, I think we are leading to the end of a class, and we will stop here unless anybody would like to. We have 2 or 3 more minutes if anybody would like to comment. All right, then see you in next week with the new book, beginning of the book 3, and that's going to be very interesting. Thank you so much. Jai Bhim and Namo Buddhaya to all of you.
Thank you, sir.
Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya.
Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya, Mangesh. Thank you so much.
Thank you.